Everyone said she smelled, until the teacher found out why and called 911 in a panic. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The September sunlight streamed through the windows of room 23, casting golden rectangles across the worn tile floor. Rebecca Callahan moved between the desks of her third-grade classroom, watching her students settle into their morning routine. 3 weeks as a substitute teacher at Pinewood Elementary had given her a sense of each child's personality. The leaders, the dreamers, the helpers. That's when she noticed her again. Elowen Parker, standing quietly beside her desk while the other children sat. "Elowen, sweetheart," Ms. Callahan said gently, approaching the small girl with auburn hair that hung limply around her pale face. "Would you like to sit down for our morning reading circle?" The child's fingers tightened around the hem of her faded green sweater. "No thank you, Ms. Callahan. I prefer standing." Her voice was barely audible, her eyes fixed on the floor. Something in the girl's posture made Rebecca's heart sink. The slight hunch of her shoulders. The way she shifted her weight as if standing itself caused discomfort. "Is something wrong with your chair, Ms.?" Callahan asked, keeping her tone light. "No, ma'am." Elowen's response was practiced, polite. As the day progressed, Rebecca observed how Elowen leaned against walls during activities, how she flinched when adults moved too quickly near her, how she never complained despite standing for hours. The other children had started to notice too, their whispers following Elowen like shadows. "She smells funny. Why doesn't she ever sit down? My mom says her dad is important." After dismissal, while organizing tomorrow's lesson plans, Rebecca heard a small sound from the reading corner. There sat Elowen, hidden behind a bookshelf, clutching her backpack. "Elowen, everyone's gone home, dear." The girl's eyes widened with alarm. "Is it that late? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's all right," Rebecca assured her, noticing how Elowen scrambled to her feet. "Is your father coming to pick you up?" At the mention of her father, Elowen's expression clouded. "Daddy doesn't like waiting," she whispered. Rebecca's instincts flared. "Elowen, is everything okay at home?" The girl's answer was interrupted by a sharp honk from outside. Elowen's body tensed. "I have to go," she said, rushing toward the door. Rebecca watched her leave, a knot forming in her stomach. Something wasn't right, and she couldn't ignore it. 20 years as a child advocacy lawyer before her career change had taught her to recognize the signs. The avoidance of sitting, the unwashed clothes worn days in a row, the faint odor that had prompted complaints from other teachers. She'd seen it before, in children whose bodies told stories their lips were too afraid to speak. And she had promised herself, after Michael, that she would never look away again. Rebecca opened her desk drawer and pulled out a notebook labeled Observations. On a fresh page, she wrote Elowen Parker at the top, followed by the date and a single line. "Still standing. Day 17, strong body odor, same clothes as yesterday. Avoids physical contact." Outside, rain began to fall, drops streaking down the classroom windows like silent tears. The faculty lounge at Pinewood Elementary buzzed with morning chatter as Rebecca stirred her tea, her mind still on Elowen Parker. 20 years advocating for abused children had taught her that they often communicated their pain through behavior rather than words. "You're doing it again, Becca," said Diane from the science department, sliding into the chair opposite her. "That 1,000-yard stare. Which student has you worried now?" Rebecca smiled faintly. Among the staff, she had earned a reputation as the substitute who noticed too much, cared too deeply. Some called it dedication, others meddling. "New student. Something's not right," she replied. "There's always something not right with someone," Diane said. Not unkindly. "You can't save them all." Rebecca's fingers tightened around her mug. Only a handful of colleagues knew why she noticed what others missed, why she couldn't turn away when instinct told her a child was in danger. 5 years ago, there had been a boy named Michael in her neighborhood who always wore long sleeves despite the summer heat. She had noticed but hadn't pushed hard enough. By the time anyone intervened, it was too late. The memory of that small, closed casket still haunted her dreams. Just be careful, Diane cautioned. Especially with the Parker girl. James Parker sits on the city council, you know. Rebecca nodded absently, gathering her papers. In a town like Pinewood, population 13,847, everyone was connected. The Parkers were old money, old names, the kind of family that had streets named after them. As she moved through her morning routine, arranging the day's worksheets, checking the weather chart, updating the birthday board, Rebecca mentally reviewed what little she knew about Elowen. The girl had lost her mother under mysterious circumstances 2 years ago. The transition paperwork mentioned she'd been in grief counseling, which might explain some withdrawal, but not her refusal to sit. Not the unwashed clothes, not the fear that seemed to radiate from her small frame. When her students began filing in, Rebecca positioned herself by the door, greeting each child by name. Her eyes found Elowen immediately, last in line, shoulders hunched forward, wearing the same unwashed sweater as yesterday despite the warm September morning. Before the girl could retreat to her desk, Rebecca stopped her. Elowen, I have a special job for you today. Would you mind handing out these reading folders? The task was deliberately easy, designed to build confidence. For a moment, something like relief passed over Elowen's face, a brief escape from whatever weight she carried. Rebecca watched her move carefully between desks, never brushing against other children, her movements precise as if navigating an invisible maze. As the day began, Rebecca opened her bottom drawer, retrieving her small notebook labeled Observations. She turned to a fresh page and wrote Elowen Parker at the top, followed by the date and another line. Day 18, still standing. Refused school lunch, said she wasn't hungry. Odors stronger today, winced when Tommy accidentally bumped her arm during art. In her apartment that evening, Rebecca sat surrounded by case files from her previous career. After Michael's death, she had resigned from her position at the district attorney's office. Unable to face another case where she might fail a child, teaching was supposed to be her fresh start. Yet here she was, haunted by the same ghosts, feeling the same knot of dread in her stomach as she reviewed her notes on Elowen. The rain tapped against her windows as she picked up a framed photograph, herself in cap and gown, her husband Daniel smiling proudly beside her. 2 months after this photo, he and their unborn daughter were gone, victims of a drunk driver who walked away with community service. "What would you do, Danny?" she whispered to the empty room. "How do you save a child who's afraid to be saved?" The October rain tapped rhythmically against the classroom windows as Rebecca added another note to her growing documentation on Elowen Parker. Day 25. Arrived without lunch again. Said she wasn't hungry when offered school lunch. Long sleeves despite gym day. Stood during entire math lesson. Strong body odor continues. A knock at her classroom door interrupted her thoughts. Principal Morgan stood in the doorway, his usual professional smile firmly in place. "Rebecca, the Parkers are here for that meeting you requested. They're waiting in my office." She hadn't expected them to come so quickly. Usually her notes on a student would fill several pages before she felt confident enough to request a parent conference. But with Elowen, every instinct urged her not to wait. "I'll be right there," she said, tucking the notebook into her desk drawer. In Principal Morgan's office, James Parker sat alone in a tailored charcoal gray suit. His firm handshake and direct gaze projected confidence. He looked nothing like what Rebecca had expected. No visible red flags, just polished professionalism. "Ms. Callahan," James said coolly, "Principal Morgan says you have concerns about Elowen." Rebecca carefully outlined her observations. Elowen's refusal to sit, her withdrawn behavior, missing lunches, and constant fatigue. She kept her tone neutral, focusing on facts rather than accusations. "We appreciate your concern," James replied, his voice smooth as glass. "But Elowen has been through a tremendous ordeal losing her mother. The trauma has affected her deeply." He dabbed at his eye with a monogrammed handkerchief. "She's seeing Dr. Mitchell for grief counseling. He's assured me that some unusual behaviors are normal during this adjustment period." Rebecca nodded. "I understand trauma can manifest in many ways. I'm just concerned about her physical comfort. Is there any reason she might be avoiding sitting down? Something flickered across James's face. So brief, Rebecca almost missed it. Elowen has always been sensitive, prone to exaggeration. At her previous school, she told her teacher the chairs at school hurt her bones. Dr. Mitchell believes it's a manifestation of her anxiety. Principal Morgan leaned forward. The Parkers are highly respected in our community, Rebecca. James's family has supported our school for generations. The message beneath his words was clear. Tread carefully. I'm doing everything possible to help Elowen through this difficult time, James said, standing to signal the meeting's end. Perhaps she just needs more time to adjust to her new school. As he left, Rebecca noticed how his knuckles whitened against the leather of his briefcase. The only sign that his composure might be less than perfect. Later that afternoon, as the children worked on art projects, Rebecca crouched beside Elowen's desk, where the girl stood coloring a family of stick figures. That's beautiful, Elowen. Is that your family? Elowen's crayon paused. My old family. Before Mommy went to heaven. And your daddy? Elowen's small fingers gripped the crayon tighter. He's not in heaven, she whispered, and began frantically scribbling black over the entire picture. That evening, Rebecca sat in her car outside the school, rain drumming on the roof as she called an old colleague from her legal days. Marcus, it's Rebecca Callahan. I need your help with something off the record. The voice that answered was warm with recognition. Becca, it's been years. What's going on? There's a child. I think she's in trouble, but I'm hitting walls everywhere I turn. The famous Callahan instinct, Marcus replied. Tell me everything. As the rain intensified, Rebecca described her concerns about Elowen, the meeting with James Parker, the principal's thinly veiled warning. Parker, Marcus mused. The real estate developer? His wife disappeared under strange circumstances a couple years back, right? Never found a body. Rebecca's blood chilled. What are you saying? Nothing concrete, just rumors. The investigation was unusual, minimal resources, quick conclusion. Ruled accidental drowning despite no body recovered. Who handled it? Sheriff Collins, old hunting buddy of Parker's, if I recall. Rebecca thought of Elowen's black scribbled drawing. Her refusal to sit, her unwashed body that seemed a deliberate shield. I need to know more, Marcus. Can you help me? Carefully, Becca. The Parkers have friends in high places. Remember what happened with the Taylor case? She did. A career destroyed, a whistleblower silenced, and a child returned to an abusive home on a technicality. I'll be careful, she promised, knowing it might be a lie. But I can't look away, not again. The gymnasium echoed with children's laughter as Ms. Callahan's class participated in their weekly physical education period. Coach Daniels had them playing a modified game of tag, their small bodies darting between cones and hoops spread across the polished floor. All except Elowen, who stood at the edge of the activity, arms wrapped around herself. Not feeling well, Parker? Coach Daniels called out, his booming voice causing Elowen to flinch visibly. She's just observing today, Rebecca interjected, moving closer to the girl. Right, Elowen. The child nodded gratefully, her eyes fixed on the floor. When the bell rang, signaling the end of gym class, Rebecca noticed dark clouds gathering outside. Looks like we might need to stay inside for recess, she told her students. Let's change quickly and head back to the classroom. In the girls' changing area, Rebecca helped button cardigans and tie shoelaces for her youngest students. She was about to leave when she realized Elowen hadn't emerged from the bathroom stall. Elowen, do you need help, sweetheart? A small sniffle came from behind the door. My shirt got wet from the drinking fountain. I have extra clothes in my emergency cabinet. Let me get you. The bathroom door burst open as Mia Reynolds rushed in. Ms. Callahan, the ceiling's leaking in the hallway. By the time Rebecca handled the minor flood and returned to the bathroom, most girls had finished changing and headed back to class. She knocked gently on Elowen's stall. Elowen, everyone's gone now. I brought you a dry shirt. The lock clicked open. Elowen stood there still in her gym shirt, her arms crossed over her chest, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. It's okay to be upset, Rebecca said, kneeling to eye level. Here, let me help you. As Elowen reluctantly turned to take the dry shirt, Rebecca gasped. The back of the child's gym shirt had ridden up, revealing a pattern of deep purplish bruises across her lower back and thighs, distinct oval shapes that no fall could explain. "Elowen," Rebecca said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "How did you get these marks?" The girl froze, her entire body tensing. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, in a voice barely audible over the distant thunder, she whispered, "The bath brush hurts when I'm dirty." Rebecca's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Daddy says I have to be clean, really clean. But if I don't smell, then—" Elowen's voice trailed off, her small fingers twisting the fabric of her shirt. "So I stayed dirty. It's safer." Rebecca fought to control her racing heart. Years of training kicked in. Document, report, protect. She helped Elowen into the dry shirt, her movements gentle despite the rage building inside her. "Elowen, I need you to be very brave. Can you do that for me?" The girl nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "I'm going to have to tell some other adults about what you just told me. Not because you're in trouble, but because what's happening to you isn't right. Daddy says no one will believe me because I tell stories." Elowen's voice quavered. "I believe you," Rebecca said firmly, taking the girl's small hand in hers, "and I'm going to make sure you're safe." As they walked back to the classroom, Rebecca reached for her cell phone. Protocol dictated reporting to the principal first, but instinct told her this couldn't wait. She dialed the number Marcus had given her last night. "Detective Rivera, it's Rebecca Callahan. I need your help. Now." The sound of rain against the windows couldn't mask Elowen's quiet sobbing as Rebecca held her close, waiting for help to arrive, praying it wasn't too late to save this child from the monster hiding behind a father's smile. The fluorescent lights of the Pinewood Police Department hummed overhead as Rebecca sat in a hard plastic chair, clutching her documentation notebook. 3 hours had passed since her call to Detective Rivera. 3 hours since uniformed officers had appeared at her classroom door. 3 hours of questions, forms, and growing frustration. "Ms. Callahan," Officer Jenkins said, sliding a foam cup of vending machine coffee across the table. "I understand your concern, but there are procedures we need to follow." "I saw the bruises myself," Rebecca insisted, flipping through her notebook. "And I've documented every concerning behavior. 25 days of observations. Elowen explicitly mentioned punishment with a bath brush. That's not something a 7-year-old invents." Officer Jenkins sighed, rubbing his temples. The girl was examined by the school nurse. The bruises appear to be several days old, but not severe enough to warrant emergency removal. "That's absurd," Rebecca countered. "She's been with James Parker for years. And what about her statement about the bath brush?" "Children sometimes," Jenkins hesitated, choosing his words carefully, "misinterpret discipline. Mr. Parker has explained that Elowen has been emotionally unstable since her mother's death. He claims she's fabricated stories at her previous school as well." Rebecca's hand tightened around her pen. "May I see that report from her previous school?" Jenkins shuffled some papers. "It's not in our files yet. We've requested the records." A knock interrupted them as a woman in a neat pantsuit entered, her ID badge identifying her as Patricia Campbell, Child Protective Services. "Ms. Callahan, I'm handling Elowen's case. I'd like to assure you we're taking this seriously, but our preliminary home visit didn't reveal any concerning conditions." "You've already been to their house?" Rebecca asked incredulously. "When?" "About an hour ago. Mr. Parker was very cooperative, showed us every room. No evidence of any inappropriate disciplinary tools was found." Rebecca fought to keep her voice level. "Of course he wouldn't leave evidence in plain sight if he knew you were coming." Ms. Campbell's expression hardened slightly. "We're trained professionals, Ms. Callahan. The home was immaculate. Elowen has her own bedroom with age-appropriate toys and books. There were no signs of neglect or abuse." "What about Elowen's statement? Did you speak with her alone?" "Briefly. She appeared nervous but didn't repeat the allegations. In fact, she denied saying anything about a bath brush." Rebecca felt a chill run through her. "She's terrified. Children recant when they're afraid." Officer Jenkins closed his notebook. Ms. Callahan, false allegations of abuse are serious. Mr. Parker is a respected member of this community. His family has lived here for generations. What does that have to do with whether he's hurting his daughter? Rebecca demanded. Ms. Campbell intervened smoothly. We'll continue monitoring the situation. Elowen will remain with her father while we conduct a thorough investigation. We've scheduled a follow-up interview at their home next week. As Rebecca left the police station, rain soaking through her cardigan, she felt a heaviness in her chest. She'd done everything by the book, and yet somehow Elowen was being sent back to the very home she had indicated was unsafe. On impulse, she drove to the county records office. If Elowen's previous school had reported concerns, there should be documentation. The clerk, an older woman with kind eyes, helped her search through the database. That's odd, the clerk murmured, frowning at her screen. There was a file, but it's been sealed. Restricted access only. Rebecca's unease deepened. Who has the authority to seal a child's welfare records? A judge, the clerk replied, or sometimes. She hesitated. Well, someone with enough influence. Can you tell me when it was sealed? The clerk typed a few keystrokes. 2 years ago, right around when... Her voice trailed off. When what? Rebecca pressed. When Mrs. Parker disappeared, the clerk whispered. Strange coincidence, don't you think? The door to the school nurse's office was slightly ajar when Rebecca arrived early the next morning. Inside, Kelly Ramirez was organizing student medications. Her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, stethoscope draped around her neck. Nurse Ramirez? Do you have a minute? Kelly glanced up, her expression shifting from professional courtesy to something more guarded. Ms. Callahan, come in and close the door. Rebecca did as instructed, surprised by the nurse's sudden intensity. You're here about Elowen Parker, Kelly said. It wasn't a question. Yes, how did you know? The nurse moved to her filing cabinet, sliding a drawer open and extracting a folder. Because I've been documenting her injuries for months. She placed the file on her desk. And like you, I've been hitting walls at every turn. Rebecca felt a surge of unexpected relief. She wasn't alone in her concerns. The bruises on her back, Rebecca began, are consistent with repeated strikes from a rigid object, Kelly finished. And they're not the first I've documented. She opened the file, revealing detailed notes and small photographs. January, linear bruising across shoulders. March, circular bruises on upper thighs. May, suspicious burn mark on right palm. All documented, all reported, all dismissed. Rebecca leafed through the pages, her hands trembling slightly. Who dismissed them? Everyone. Principal Morgan said I was overreacting. CPS said the injuries were minor and consistent with normal childhood accidents. When I pushed harder, I was told to focus on my job description. Kelly's voice carried the edge of someone who had fought too long alone. Why are you showing me this? Kelly's eyes met Rebecca's. Because yesterday you did what no other teacher here has done. You called authorities directly, instead of going through channels designed to bury the problem. You put your job on the line for that child. Rebecca nodded, suddenly understanding. And now you're doing the same by showing me these records. I became a school nurse to protect children, not to document their suffering while adults look the other way. Kelly leaned forward. Something is very wrong in that house, and it's not just the bruises. Have you noticed how Elowen reacts to water? She avoids the drinking fountain, always brings a water bottle from home, which is always nearly full at the end of the day, Kelly added. And when I tried to clean a scrape on her arm last month, she panicked at the sight of a wet cloth. Rebecca's mind raced, connecting dots. The bathing. She stays dirty deliberately. She told me the bath brush hurts when she's dirty, but she'd rather endure the teasing than whatever happens during bath time. Exactly. This isn't just physical abuse. There's something specific about water or bathing that terrifies her. Rebecca thought of the clerk's words at the county records office. Elowen's mother supposedly drowned 2 years ago. Body never recovered. Kelly's expression darkened. And now her daughter is terrified of water. That can't be coincidence. A knock at the door startled them both. Kelly quickly slid the file under some papers as Principal Morgan poked his head in. "Ms. Callahan, a word in my office when you have a moment." His tone was pleasant, but his eyes were cold. "And Nurse Ramirez, Mrs. Campbell from CPS, called. She needs Alawan's medical records sent over by noon." After he left, the women exchanged glances. "They're circling the wagons," Kelly murmured. "Be careful, Rebecca. The last teacher who raised concerns about the Parker girl was terminated for performance issues mid-year." Rebecca squared her shoulders. "I was a child advocacy lawyer for 20 years before I became a teacher. I know how to document, how to build a case. With your evidence and mine combined, it still might not be enough," Kelly warned. "Not in this town, not against James Parker. Then we need more, and I think I know someone who can help us get it." That evening, Rebecca met Detective Marcus Rivera at a diner one town over, away from curious eyes. As they shared their evidence and suspicions, a partnership formed. A teacher, a nurse, and a detective, united by one simple belief. A child's safety mattered more than a powerful man's reputation. The whispers followed Rebecca through the hallways of Pinewood Elementary. 3 days had passed since her meeting with Detective Rivera, and somehow word had spread about her continued investigation into the Parker family. "I heard she's obsessed with that poor man," a parent volunteer murmured as Rebecca passed the main office. "First his wife disappears, now this. Hasn't he suffered enough?" Another replied, their voices deliberately loud enough to be overheard. The teacher's lounge fell silent when Rebecca entered, colleagues suddenly absorbed in their phones or paperwork. A stack of her graded assignments had mysteriously disappeared from her mailbox. Her classroom computer password no longer worked. "They're isolating you," Kelly whispered during their lunch meeting in the nurse's office. "Same thing happened to me when I first reported my concerns about Alawan. Nothing came of it and I nearly lost my job." "How can an entire town look the other way?" Rebecca asked, pushing her untouched sandwich aside. "Money, influence, fear?" Kelly leaned closer. "The Parkers have all three. James Parker's company employs half the town. His brother sits on the school board. His cousin married the sheriff's daughter." Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Found something. Check your email." The attached document was a police report from 2 years ago, the investigation into Catherine Parker's disappearance. Heavily redacted, but with one crucial detail highlighted. Witness statement from minor child, EP, deemed unreliable due to inconsistencies and childish fantasies. Child claims to have seen father pushing mother underwater in bathtub. Rebecca's hands shook as she showed Kelly. She saw it. Alawan saw her father kill her mother. "And nobody believed her," Kelly whispered. "A traumatized 7-year-old couldn't provide a coherent statement, so they dismissed it." Before Rebecca could respond, Principal Morgan appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Callahan, my office now." The walk to his office felt like a march to execution. Inside, James Parker sat beside the principal's desk, his expression a careful mask of concern. A woman in an expensive suit sat beside him, legal pad in hand. "Rebecca," Principal Morgan began, his tone falsely genial. "This is James Parker, whom you've met, and Patricia Reynolds, the school board's attorney." Rebecca remained standing, arms crossed. "What's this about?" Morgan's fake smile tightened. "We've received some disturbing reports about your conduct regarding Alawan Parker. Specifically, that you've continued to pursue unfounded accusations after CPS cleared Mr. Parker of any wrongdoing." "Cleared? They've barely begun their investigation," Rebecca countered. James Parker leaned forward, his voice smooth as silk. "Ms. Callahan, I understand you were previously employed as a child advocate. Perhaps you're seeing ghosts from old cases, projecting past failures onto my family situation." Rebecca felt ice in her veins. How did he know about her previous career? "Your continued harassment is affecting my daughter," James continued. "She came home crying yesterday, asking if she was going to be taken away. Is that how you protect children? By terrorizing them?" The attorney slid a document across the desk. "This is a cease and desist order. You are to have no further contact with Alawan Parker. The school board has also decided to place you on administrative leave pending review of your contract. Rebecca stared at the paper, mind racing. On what grounds? Unprofessional conduct, creating a hostile environment, making unfounded accusations against a respected family, Morgan listed flatly. Your substitute position will be filled by Mrs. Henderson effective tomorrow. And Alawan. Who will protect her? James stood, towering over Rebecca. My daughter doesn't need protection from me. She needs protection from you and your witch hunt. As Rebecca left the office, clutching her personal items in a small box, she saw Alawan standing in the hallway, eyes downcast. When the girl looked up, her silent plea was unmistakable. Don't leave me here. The small apartment Rebecca had called home for the past 3 years felt different somehow. Less like a sanctuary and more like a fortress under siege. Papers covered her dining table. Photocopied records, handwritten notes, timelines, and photographs of Alawan's injuries from Kelly's file. 3 days had passed since her suspension. 3 days of unanswered calls to CPS. 3 days of watching the Parker house from her car parked a block away, noting who came and went. 3 days of wondering if Alawan was safe. The knock at her door was unexpected. Rebecca approached cautiously, peering through the peephole to find Detective Rivera standing in the hallway, his expression grim. Marcus, what's happened? He entered quickly, scanning the room with professional suspicion before speaking. Someone accessed your personnel file at the school district office yesterday. Unauthorized. Rebecca felt a chill. James Parker? Can't prove it, but the timing is suspicious. I came to warn you. Be careful. These people play hardball. She gestured to her evidence wall. I'm not backing down. Not while Alawan is still in that house. Marcus studied the carefully organized documentation. You've been busy. Kelly and I have been piecing things together. Look at this. Rebecca pointed to a calendar. Every Thursday, Alawan comes to school especially dirty and distressed. Every Friday she's absent. This pattern goes back months. You think something happens on Thursday nights? I think that's when James forces her to bathe, Rebecca said quietly. And I think whatever happens during those baths is why she's trying to stay dirty. Marcus nodded grimly. Thursday is tomorrow. We need to get her out before then. How? CPS won't act without more evidence. The police report didn't lead to charges. The court wouldn't grant an emergency removal based on what we have. A knock at the door interrupted them. Rebecca tensed, but the face in the peephole belonged to Kelly Ramirez, her expression urgent. I got your message, she said, entering quickly. Is it true? They're trying to transfer Alawan? Marcus nodded. James Parker filed paperwork yesterday to change schools. Claims the current environment is traumatizing his daughter. Transfer would happen next week. Rebecca felt the last piece click into place. He's running. He knows we're onto him, so he's moving her somewhere we can't watch. There's something else, Kelly said, pulling a folded paper from her bag. Alawan left this for me during her medication check this morning. It was a drawing. Crude, childlike strokes in heavy crayon. A bathtub colored black. A small figure curled at one end. A larger figure looming above. And written in wobbly letters, help before bath. Thursday, Rebecca whispered. We're out of time. Marcus studied the drawing. This isn't enough for a warrant, not against James Parker in this town. Then we go around the system, Rebecca said, determination hardening her voice. Kelly, can you get Alawan alone tomorrow? Nurse's office, routine check. Kelly nodded. She's due for her weekly weight check. Standard for children with documented health concerns. And I have a friend at the state police barracks in Millfield, Marcus added. Outside local jurisdiction. If we can get Alawan to tell her story directly to him. She's terrified, Rebecca cautioned. She tried once before, after her mother disappeared, and no one believed her. Why would she trust anyone now? Because of you, Kelly said simply. She trusts you. That's why she's been leaving clues. Why she wrote this note. She knows you're trying to help. Rebecca touched the drawing gently, thinking of the small girl who had created it, alone, frightened, crying out in the only way she knew how. "Tomorrow, then," she said quietly. "One chance to get this right." As Marcus and Kelly left, finalizing the details of their plan, Rebecca stood before her evidence wall, staring at a school photo of Elowen, solemn eyes in a too serious face. "Hold on, sweetheart," she whispered. "We're coming for you." Dark clouds gathered over Pinewood Elementary as Rebecca parked her car a block away, head low, sunglasses obscuring her face despite the gloomy weather. Administrative leave meant she had no business being here, but today wasn't about following rules. It was about saving Elowen. The side entrance near the cafeteria would be unlocked for morning deliveries. Rebecca checked her watch, 7:45 a.m. 7:45. Kelly would have Elowen in the nurse's office by 8:30. Detective Rivera and his state police contact would arrive at 9 km. Everything hinged on perfect timing. Her phone buzzed with a text from Kelly. "She's here early. James dropped her off himself. Unusual, watching me closely, something's wrong." Rebecca's pulse quickened. Had their plan been discovered? She texted back, "Proceed as normal, I'm coming in." Using her old substitute ID card, Rebecca slipped through the service entrance, keeping to less traveled hallways. The school felt different now. Hostile territory rather than the place she'd come to love. She ducked into an empty classroom when Principal Morgan passed by, his conversation with someone floating through the door. "Assured Mr. Parker, we're handling the situation discreetly. The transfer paperwork will be expedited. And Callahan? Won't be a problem after today. The board is meeting this afternoon to terminate her contract. Reynolds is building a harassment case." Rebecca pressed against the wall, heart pounding. They were accelerating everything, trying to remove Elowen before anyone could intervene. Her phone buzzed again. "Kelly. Nurse's office. Now, emergency." Rebecca abandoned caution, moving quickly through the halls. The nurse's office door was slightly ajar, voices drifting out. "Absolutely unacceptable." James Parker's voice cold and controlled. "Mr. Parker, I was simply following standard protocol for what? Interrogating my daughter? Taking photographs without parental consent?" Rebecca froze outside the door. Inside, she could see Kelly standing defensively behind her desk, James Parker looming over her. Principal Morgan stood nearby, his expression anxious, and in the corner, small and silent, sat Elowen, eyes fixed on the floor. "The bruising on her arms is concerning, Mr. Parker," Kelly was saying, her professional demeanor intact despite the tension. "As a mandated reporter, I'm obligated to document." "You've overstepped your authority for the last time, Nurse Ramirez." James turned to Principal Morgan. "I want her removed from her position, effective immediately." Morgan nodded obsequiously. "Of course, Mr. Parker. We take these privacy concerns very seriously. And I'm taking my daughter home. Now." James reached for Elowen, who flinched visibly. "Come, Elowen." Rebecca couldn't stay hidden any longer. She pushed the door open. "She's not going anywhere with you." The room froze. James recovered first, his surprise morphing into calculated anger. "Ms. Callahan, trespassing now, are we? On top of harassment." Principal Morgan stepped forward. "Rebecca, you're on administrative leave. You have no right to be here. I'm calling security." "Call whoever you want," Rebecca said, moving to stand between James and Elowen. "But she's not leaving with him." She turned to Kelly. "Show them what you found." Kelly hesitated, then turned her computer monitor toward them. On the screen was an X-ray of a small arm, with telltale shadows indicating old fractures. 3 healed breaks, improperly set, and this one, she pointed to another image, shows 2 cracked ribs, approximately 6 months old. None of these injuries were ever reported or treated medically. James's face darkened. "Those records are private. You had no right." "I had every right when I saw fresh bruises this morning," Kelly countered. "The state requires full medical examination when new injuries appear on a child with prior suspected abuse." Rebecca watched Elowen, who had raised her head, eyes darting between the adults. There was something different in her expression today. Not just fear, but resolve. "Elowen," Rebecca said gently, You don't have to be afraid anymore. We can help you. James lunged forward, grabbing Rebecca's arm. Get away from my daughter. This ends now. No, Daddy. Elowen's small voice cut through the tension. Don't hurt her too. The room went still. James released Rebecca's arm as if burned. Elowen, we're leaving, now. If you take her, Rebecca said quietly. Detective Rivera will be waiting at your house with a search warrant by noon. It was a bluff. The warrant request was still pending, but James couldn't know that. His eyes narrowed. You've made a serious mistake, Ms. Callahan. He turned to Principal Morgan. I want restraining orders filed against both these women. They are not to come near my daughter again. As James pulled Elowen toward the door, the girl looked back, her eyes meeting Rebecca's. In that glance was a message. Clear as day. Help me, tonight. The clock in Rebecca's apartment read 11:47 p.m. as she spread Elowen's drawing across her kitchen table alongside the medical photographs and her documentation notebook. Sleep had become elusive, replaced by an obsessive need to find some way, any way, to help Elowen. The girl's desperate look from this morning haunted her. A sharp knock at her door made her jump. At this hour in her quiet complex, unexpected visitors were rare. Who is it? She called, approaching cautiously. Detective Marcus Rivera, Pinewood Police Department, came the reply. I need to speak with you about Elowen Parker. Rebecca opened the door to find Marcus with tired eyes and disheveled dark hair. His police badge held up for inspection. His expression was grim but not unfriendly. May I come in? He asked, glancing over his shoulder as if concerned about being seen. Rebecca hesitated, then stepped aside. The detective entered, immediately noticing the materials spread across her table. I see you've been building your own case, he remarked, picking up one of the medical photographs. Not that it's done any good, Rebecca replied, watching him warily. Are you here to warn me off too? Tell me to mind my own business? Marcus shook his head. Just the opposite. I received your initial report weeks ago, started looking into it myself. Off the record. He paused, setting down his badge on the table. Then I found out why it was dismissed so quickly. The Parker family connections, Rebecca replied. More than that, there's a pattern of children showing signs of abuse in that house, then being quietly transferred elsewhere when questions arise. Your report is the first that made it as far as a medical examination. Rebecca's pulse quickened. Why are you telling me this? Why not follow official channels? Marcus's face darkened. Because I tried that route 3 years ago in Riverdale County. My niece was placed with a politically connected foster family. She showed similar signs, behavioral changes, unexplained injuries. I reported it through proper channels. Everyone assured me they were handling it. His voice cracked slightly. 2 months later, she was dead, officially ruled an unfortunate accident. I'm so sorry, Rebecca whispered. After that, I transferred here, started fresh. But when I saw your report about Elowen, the same red flags, the same pattern of institutional protection, he gestured to her documents. I need to know everything you've observed, everything Elowen has told you. Rebecca sat across from him, a cautious hope building. You believe me? I believe the evidence, and I believe a child is in danger. Marcus pulled out a small notebook. Off the record to start. Then we'll figure out how to build a case that can't be buried. For the next hour, Rebecca detailed everything. Elowen's refusal to sit, her collapse in the nurse's office, the revelations about the bath brush and her constant fear. Marcus listened intently, asking occasional questions about timelines and specific statements. When she showed him Elowen's drawing of the bathtub, his expression grew grave. You mentioned Catherine Parker's disappearance, he said. What if it wasn't just Elowen who witnessed something? What do you mean? Marcus pulled out his phone, showing her a document. I've been looking into other children who've lived in the Parker house. Did you know James and Catherine fostered children? Usually one at a time, generally girls between 6 and 9. Rebecca's stomach turned. How many? At least 5 over the past decade. All eventually transferred to other homes, moved out of state, or simply disappeared from the system. Where are they now? That's the thing, I can't find them. Records sealed, files missing, dead ends everywhere I look. Marcus scrolled to another document. Except for this one, Lily Simmons, age 8 when she lived with the Parkers, now 17, recently arrested for shoplifting in Baltimore. You think she might talk about her time there? Worth a try. I'm driving up tomorrow. He showed her a search warrant request form. In the meantime, I need everything you have on Elowen. Judge Franklin in the next county owes me a favor. Might be willing to sign this if we build a strong enough case. Rebecca gathered her evidence, hope mixing with dread. We need to move quickly. Whatever happens in that bathroom on Thursday nights, tonight is Thursday. Marcus checked his watch, his expression hardening. Then we don't wait for tomorrow. As they prepared to leave, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Help, bath night, please. Marcus read the message over her shoulder. How would Elowen have your number? She wouldn't, Rebecca said, cold realization dawning. But Kelly would. Something's happening at the Parker house. Now. Rain pummeled the windshield as Detective Rivera's unmarked car sped through Pinewood's empty streets. The wipers struggled against the downpour, creating a rhythmic backdrop to Rebecca's racing thoughts. The anonymous text message glowed on her phone. Help, bath night, please. Could be a trap, Marcus cautioned, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. Someone trying to lure you into violating the restraining order. Or it could be Kelly trying to warn us, Rebecca countered. Either way, Elowen is in that house tonight. We can't wait for a warrant that might never come. Marcus took a sharp turn, pulling into a darkened parking lot 2 blocks from the Parker residence. He killed the engine and turned to face her. Before we go any further, you need to understand what's at stake here. Best case scenario, we find evidence of abuse, get Elowen to safety, and face disciplinary action for procedural violations. Worst case, he let the sentence hang between them. Worst case is we do nothing, and that little girl ends up another statistic, Rebecca finished. Another child failed by the system. Rain drummed against the car roof as they sat in silence, each wrestling with the weight of what came next. I'm not asking you to risk your career, Rebecca said finally. You've got more to lose than I do. Marcus's laugh was hollow. My career? I crossed that line the minute I started investigating outside channels. This isn't about careers anymore. He reached into the glove compartment and removed a small recording device. This is about justice. For Elowen, for my niece, for all the children nobody listened to. Rebecca thought of her own losses, the husband and unborn child taken from her, the career she'd abandoned after failing Michael, the endless string of temporary teaching positions, never staying long enough to form attachments. Until Elowen. How do we do this? She asked, decision made. We do a welfare check, Marcus replied, checking his service weapon. I'm still a police officer. I can approach the house if I have reasonable concern for a child's safety. Which you do, based on the text. Exactly, you stay in the car as backup. If I find something, I call it in immediately. Get state police involved. Rebecca shook her head. Elowen knows me. She trusts me. If she's traumatized, she'll respond better to me than to another strange man with a badge. Their argument was interrupted by Rebecca's phone ringing. Kelly Ramirez's name flashed on the screen. Kelly, are you okay? Did you send that text? The nurse's voice was breathless, panicked. No, but I just got one too, from an unknown number. Rebecca, I think it's from Elowen. How would she have our numbers? The emergency contact list. It's posted in every classroom. Teacher and nurse contacts for each grade. She could have memorized them. Or someone's setting us up, Marcus interjected. There's more, Kelly continued. I drove by the Parker house on my way home. There was another car there, expensive, black windows. A man went inside carrying camera equipment. Rebecca and Marcus exchanged alarmed glances. What kind of camera equipment? Marcus asked, taking the phone. Professional looking, big case. And this isn't the first time. I've seen similar visitors on other Thursday nights when I've driven past. The pieces clicked together in Rebecca's mind. Elowen's fear of bathing, the unexplained injuries. the pattern of foster children cycling through the Parker home. "It's not just abuse," she whispered, horrified realization dawning. "He's recording it, possibly selling it." Marcus's face hardened into grim resolve. That changes everything. If there's production of exploitative material happening right now, we have cause for immediate intervention. He started the car, pulling back onto the rain-slicked street. "Kelly, call this number." He recited a string of digits. "It's Lieutenant Hayes with State Police. Tell him everything. The text, the visitor, the camera. Tell him Detective Rivera is conducting an emergency welfare check at the Parker residence and requesting immediate backup." As they approached the Parker home, a grand Victorian at the end of a private drive, Rebecca could see lights on in an upstairs window. A sleek black car sat in the driveway beside James Parker's silver BMW. "Remember the plan," Marcus said, parking at the curb. "I approach first official capacity. You wait until I signal it's clear." Rebecca nodded, throat tight with anxiety. As Marcus approached the front door, badge in hand, she watched from the car, rain streaming down the windows, blurring her view. When the door opened, she could make out James Parker's tall figure, his body language shifting from irritation to calculated charm as he recognized the detective. Their conversation was lost to the storm, but she could see Marcus gesturing, probably explaining about the welfare check. Then something changed. James's posture stiffened. He began to close the door. Marcus put his foot in the threshold, his hand moving toward his service weapon. Rebecca didn't wait for the signal. Something in her, the same instinct that had recognized Elowen's silent cries for help, told her this was the moment. Now or never. She was out of the car and running through the rain before conscious thought caught up with action. By the time she reached the porch, Marcus and James were in a heated standoff. "You have no right to enter my home without a warrant," James was saying, his voice controlled despite the rage in his eyes. "I have reasonable cause to believe a child is in danger," Marcus countered. "And I'm not leaving until I see Elowen." "Miss Callahan," James's tone shifted to ice as he noticed her. "This is a direct violation of the restraining order. I'll have both your jobs by morning." "Where is she, James?" Rebecca demanded. "Past caring about orders or jobs or professional consequences. Where's Elowen?" A sound from inside the house caught their attention. A muffled cry, quickly silenced. Without hesitation, Marcus pushed past James into the foyer, hand on his holster. Rebecca followed, heart hammering against her ribs. The grand entryway opened to a sweeping staircase. Another cry, louder this time, came from upstairs. "Police! Everyone stay where you are!" Marcus shouted, drawing his weapon as he took the stairs 2 at a time. James moved with surprising speed, grabbing Rebecca's arm as she tried to follow. "You've made a terrible mistake," he hissed, fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "You have no idea what you've done." "I know exactly what I've done," she replied, wrenching free. "I've chosen a child's safety over your reputation. Something this town should have done long ago." From upstairs came the sounds of a struggle, a crash. Raised voices, Marcus shouting commands. Rebecca bolted up the stairs, James close behind. The bathroom door at the end of the hall stood open, light spilling onto the polished hardwood. As Rebecca reached the doorway, the scene inside seared itself into her memory. Elowen trembling in a half-filled bathtub, bruises stark against her pale skin. A professional camera on a tripod, its lens pointed at the tub. A stranger frantically gathering equipment. And Marcus, weapon drawn, positioning himself between the men and the child. "Rebecca!" Elowen's cry cut through the tension, her small arms reaching out. Without thinking, Rebecca rushed to the tub, gathering the girl into a towel, lifting her from the water that had been weaponized against her. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered, holding Elowen close as the child sobbed against her shoulder. "I've got you now, you're safe." Behind them, Marcus had both men against the wall, radioing for backup. James Parker's perfect mask had finally slipped, revealing the monster beneath, eyes cold with hatred, mouth twisted in fury. "You'll regret this," he snarled at Rebecca. "Both of you, this isn't over." Rebecca turned her back on him, focusing entirely on the shivering child in her arms. "Yes, James," she said quietly. "For you it is." In the distance, sirens wailed, growing louder as state police converged on the house that had hidden its secrets for far too long. Outside, the storm raged on, washing away years of silence and complicity, while inside, a little girl who had been brave enough to reach out for help was finally, truly heard. The State Police Command Center had established a perimeter around the Parker residence, blue and red lights cutting through the rain-drenched night. Lieutenant Hayes, a career officer with the state's Special Victims Unit, directed his team with practiced efficiency. Evidence technicians in white coveralls, child welfare specialists, and uniformed officers securing the scene. Inside an ambulance parked at the curb, a paramedic gently examined Elowen while Rebecca sat nearby, holding the girl's hand. The child hadn't spoken since they'd left the house, her eyes wide and vigilant, her grip on Rebecca's fingers unwavering. "No signs of immediate physical trauma," the paramedic said quietly. "But she's dehydrated and showing signs of prolonged stress. We should transport her to Children's Hospital for a complete examination." Rebecca nodded, her throat tight. "I'll come with her." "Are you family?" the paramedic asked. Before Rebecca could answer, Elowen's small voice broke her silence. "She's my safe person." The simple declaration, spoken with absolute certainty, brought tears to Rebecca's eyes. The paramedic smiled gently, understanding passing between the adults. "Then you'd better ride along," she said, preparing the ambulance for departure. Detective Rivera appeared at the ambulance doors, his expression grim but satisfied. "Both Parker and his associate are in custody. State police are executing the search warrant now." He lowered his voice, glancing at Elowen. "Initial findings include hidden cameras in the bathroom and bedroom. Computer equipment, external hard drives." Rebecca's stomach turned at the implications. "How extensive?" "We don't know yet, but based on file dates, this has been going on for years." Marcus hesitated. "Rebecca, they found a locked room in the basement. Appears to have been used as a studio of sorts. And there are indications other children were involved." The weight of this revelation settled over them. The abuse wasn't isolated to Elowen, wasn't limited to bath time punishment. It was calculated, documented, possibly distributed. "Catherine Parker," Rebecca whispered. "Do they think?" Marcus nodded grimly. "They're bringing in ground-penetrating radar tomorrow. The backyard, specifically near the garden shed." Elowen's grip on Rebecca's hand tightened. Though she gave no other sign of listening, her awareness was evident. "Let's focus on now," Rebecca said, stroking the child's hair. "On getting her somewhere safe." As the ambulance prepared to depart, Lieutenant Hayes approached. "Ms. Callahan, we'll need your statement. And Detective Rivera, the sheriff wants to speak with you immediately about procedure." Behind the professional courtesy, his meaning was clear. Consequences were coming for their unorthodox actions, regardless of the outcome. "I'll meet you at the hospital," Marcus told Rebecca. This won't take long. But the look they exchanged said otherwise. Rules had been broken. Careers might be over. Neither regretted it for a moment. At Children's Hospital, the pediatric wing hummed with quiet efficiency, even at this late hour. Dr. Patel, a specialist in trauma medicine, conducted a thorough examination while a child psychologist named Dr. Santos observed. Rebecca waited outside, answering questions from a state police detective and a representative from the Department of Child Services. "Where will she go tonight?" Rebecca asked when they'd finished taking her statement. The DCS worker, a tired-looking woman named Mrs. Bennett, consulted her tablet. "Emergency foster placement. We have a family on standby who specializes in trauma cases." "She's terrified of strangers," Rebecca argued. "Couldn't I?" "You're not an approved foster parent, Ms. Callahan, and given your involvement in the case, there would be concerns about objectivity." Before Rebecca could protest further, Dr. Patel emerged from the examination room, her expression troubled. "How is she?" Rebecca asked, rising to her feet. "Physically, she has numerous healing injuries consistent with repeated abuse. bruising in various stages. Minor burns, evidence of past fractures, nothing life-threatening but indicative of long-term maltreatment. The doctor's professional demeanor couldn't entirely mask her anger. Psychologically, she's in shock. She's asking for you. Inside the examination room, Elowen sat wrapped in a hospital gown that emphasized her smallness. When she saw Rebecca, her face crumpled. "You came," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I didn't think anyone would ever come." Rebecca rushed to her side, gathering her close, careful of her injuries. "I promised I'd help you, didn't I? And I always keep my promises." Elowen buried her face against Rebecca's shoulder. "He said no one would believe me, about the bath times, about Mommy, about the pictures." "I believe you," Rebecca said fiercely. "Detective Rivera believes you, Dr. Patel believes you, and now everyone else will too." Mrs. Bennet cleared her throat from the doorway. "We should go soon. The Foster family is waiting." Elowen's arms tightened around Rebecca's neck, panic evident in every tense muscle. "Don't leave me!" Rebecca looked over the child's head at Mrs. Bennet, silently pleading for flexibility, for humanity in a system that too often lacked both. The DCS worker hesitated, then sighed. "I'll make some calls. See if there's any way you can stay with her tonight." "Just tonight," she emphasized. "Tomorrow we follow protocol." As Mrs. Bennet stepped out to make her calls, Rebecca continued holding Elowen, rocking gently, murmuring reassurances. Outside the window, the storm had finally passed. Dawn was still hours away, but for the first time in years, both Elowen and Rebecca felt something like hope break through the darkness. The Pinewood Herald's front-page headline hit like a physical blow. "Unhinged, ex-lawyer's vigilante justice destroys respected family." Rebecca stared at the newspaper spread across the hospital cafeteria table, her hands trembling with exhaustion and anger. The article quoted anonymous sources, claiming Rebecca had a personal vendetta against James Parker after being reprimanded at work. It suggested she had coached Elowen to make false statements and had conspired with Detective Rivera to plant evidence. The piece painted James Parker as a grieving widower and dedicated father whose life had been upended by baseless accusations. "Don't read that garbage," Marcus said, sliding into the chair opposite her. Dark circles underlined his eyes from the sleepless night of questioning. "The Parkers own the newspaper. James's cousin is the editor." Rebecca closed the paper, suddenly bone-weary. Will it ever end? This web of corruption and protection? Marcus's expression softened. "The truth doesn't stay buried forever. You proved that last night." He gestured toward the pediatric ward where Elowen slept safely. "Whatever happens next, remember that." As they sat in exhausted silence, Rebecca's phone rang, the school district's number. With a deep breath, she answered, knowing what was coming. "Ms. Callahan." The superintendent's voice was formal, distant. "In light of recent events, the board has voted to terminate your employment effective immediately. Please turn in your classroom keys and district ID by the end of the week." She ended the call without responding, her eyes meeting Marcus's. "They're trying to silence us," she said. "Let them try," he replied with quiet determination. "Some battles are worth losing everything for." Before they could discuss further, Mrs. Bennet from DCS appeared, her expression troubled. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. "James Parker made bail this morning." "What?" Rebecca stood, coffee forgotten. "How is that possible after what we found?" "His brother, Judge Parker, set the bail. He's arguing that James was unaware of what his frequent guest was doing, claiming this man was blackmailing James rather than working with him." Marcus's disgust was palpable. "It won't stick, but it bought him temporary freedom." "Where's Elowen?" Rebecca demanded, already moving toward the elevators. "Safe under police guard," Mrs. Bennet assured her. "But there's more. James's attorney is filing for emergency reinstatement of custody, claiming last night's search was conducted illegally without proper authorization." The elevator doors opened to reveal Lieutenant Hayes, his expression grave. "Rivera," he called. "Sheriff wants you at the station, now." Marcus stood his ground. "I'm staying with Elowen until additional security arrives." That's not a request, detective. It's an order. Professional standards is waiting. The implication was clear. Marcus faced not just disciplinary action, but potential criminal charges for his role in the unauthorized entry of the Parker home. Go, Rebecca told him. I'll stay with Elowen. As Marcus left, Rebecca turned to Mrs. Bennett. What happens now? The social worker sighed, the weight of a broken system evident in her slumped shoulders. Now we fight the legal battle. The evidence is compelling, but the Parkers have resources. Connections. They'll challenge every photograph, every statement, every medical finding. And Elowen. She can't testify against her own father without being re-traumatized. There are alternatives. Closed-circuit testimony, recorded statements. Mrs. Bennett checked her watch. The state attorney's office is sending a child advocacy lawyer to discuss options. A chill ran through Rebecca at the phrase. Child advocacy lawyer. The role she had abandoned after failing Michael. The universe had a twisted sense of irony. Outside Elowen's room, a uniformed officer stood guard. Inside, the girl slept fitfully, her small frame dwarfed by the hospital bed. Rebecca took her usual place in the chair beside her, gently taking the child's hand. I'm here, she whispered, though Elowen couldn't hear. And I'm not going anywhere. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Sheriff suspended me, surrendered badge and gun. Worth it. Stay safe. Outside the hospital windows, protesters had gathered, some supporting the Parkers, others calling for justice for Elowen. The battle lines of Pinewood had been drawn, with a traumatized 7-year-old girl at the center of a storm she never asked for. As Rebecca watched Elowen sleep, she made a silent vow. No matter the cost to her career, her reputation, or her future in this town, this child would never again suffer alone in silence. The Pinewood County Courthouse stood imposing against the gray October sky, its marble columns and broad steps designed to intimidate those seeking justice within its walls. Television vans lined the street, reporters clutching microphones as they delivered updates to a nation now captivated by what media had dubbed the bathroom of Pinewood. Rebecca Callahan adjusted her simple navy blazer, the same one she'd worn to parent-teacher conferences for years, as she climbed the courthouse steps. The past 3 weeks had transformed her life completely. Fired from her job, vilified in local press, followed by photographers whenever she left her apartment. Only the steady support of Detective Rivera and the knowledge that Elowen was safe kept her moving forward. Inside the packed courtroom, she took her seat behind the prosecutor's table. The special prosecutor assigned by the state attorney general, Vanessa Chen, had spent hours preparing Rebecca for today's preliminary hearing, an opportunity to determine if enough evidence existed to proceed to trial against James Parker and his accomplice. All rise, the bailiff announced as Judge Marilyn Ocasio entered, a federal judge brought in specifically to avoid local conflicts of interest. Rebecca scanned the courtroom, her eyes settling briefly on the defense table where James Parker sat in an expensive suit, his expression carefully composed. Behind him sat his brother, Judge Richard Parker, his cold gaze fixed directly on Rebecca. Judge Ocasio spoke with crisp authority. This preliminary hearing will determine if the state has sufficient evidence to proceed with charges of child abuse, exploitation of a minor, production of illegal materials, and obstruction of justice. Prosecutor Chen began methodically presenting evidence, photographs of Elowen's injuries, medical reports detailing malnutrition and trauma, consistent with prolonged abuse, financial records showing suspicious payments between the defendants. The courtroom remained silent, except for occasional gasps as particularly damning evidence was revealed. Then came the most powerful evidence, recordings found in James Parker's home office. Judge Ocasio allowed only transcripts to be shown in court, but her own expression hardened visibly as she reviewed the full content privately. The state calls Rebecca Callahan, Prosecutor Chen announced, as Rebecca took the stand and was sworn in. She felt the weight of the Parkers' stares. Richard Parker leaned forward, whispering to James's attorney. For nearly an hour, Rebecca testified about her observations of Elowen, the documentation she had kept, the institutional barriers she'd encountered when reporting her concerns. Defense attorneys objected repeatedly, trying to paint her as an unstable, vindictive employee with a persecution complex. "Ms. Callahan," James Parker's attorney asked during cross-examination, "isn't it true that you broke into my client's home without a warrant, violating a legally obtained restraining order?" Before she could answer, Judge Ocasio interrupted. "Counselor, the legality of evidence collection has been addressed in previous motions. The emergency exception applies given the circumstances they discovered. Move on." The attorney shifted tactics. "Isn't it true that you've been reprimanded multiple times for overstepping with students? For seeing abuse where none exists?" Rebecca met his gaze steadily. "I was reprimanded once for reporting suspected abuse of Michael Donovan, a second grader in my neighborhood 5 years ago. That report was dismissed. 3 months later, Michael died from injuries inflicted by his stepfather." Her voice remained calm despite the emotion behind her words. "I promised myself I would never stay silent again, no matter the personal cost." A murmur ran through the courtroom as the attorney faltered. Prosecutor Chen called her next witness, a courageous county clerk who had secretly preserved copies of previously lost abuse reports, revealing a decade-long pattern of complaints being buried. The most powerful testimony, however, came via closed-circuit television. Alawan Parker, seated in a comfortable room at Children's Hospital, spoke in a clear voice about the bath times, the basement where camera equipment was stored, and the visitors who took pictures and videos. When asked why she didn't tell anyone sooner, her answer silenced the courtroom. "Uncle Richard said no one would believe kids like me. He said I was lucky anyone wanted me at all." By late afternoon, Judge Ocasio had heard enough. "There is more than sufficient evidence to proceed to trial on all charges," she declared. "Bail is revoked for all defendants pending trial. This case will be transferred to federal court due to the interstate distribution elements." As officers moved to take the defendants into custody, James maintained his stone-faced composure, while Richard Parker stood, pointing at Rebecca. "This isn't over," he called out. "You've destroyed my family with your lies." Judge Ocasio banged her gavel. "Remove him from my courtroom." Outside, rain had given way to weak autumn sunshine. Rebecca stood on the courthouse steps beside Marcus Rivera, watching the defendants being led to police vehicles. "It's really happening," she said softly. "They're actually going to face justice." Marcus nodded. "The case is solid. Chen says with the evidence we have, they're looking at decades in prison." "And Alawan?" "Being placed in a vetted home across the state, far from Parker influence. Proper therapy, proper school." He hesitated. "She asked about you. Wanted to know if you were okay." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "She was worried about me, after everything she's been through?" "That's the thing about children," Marcus said gently. "Their capacity for compassion sometimes survives even the worst humanity can inflict on them." As they walked down the steps together, a small crowd had gathered. Teachers from Pinewood Elementary holding handmade signs. "We believe Ms. Callahan and justice for Alawan." Kelly Ramirez stepped forward with an envelope. "The teachers took up a collection," she explained. "It's not much, but it might help until the wrongful termination lawsuit is settled." Rebecca shook her head, overwhelmed by the gesture. For weeks she had felt utterly alone in her fight against the system. "What happens now?" someone called out. Rebecca looked back at the courthouse, then to the supportive faces around her. "Now we make sure this never happens again. We listen to children. We question authority when necessary. We remember that sometimes the most important truths come from the smallest voices." Chapter 15. The Children's Voice. 1 year after the Parker case shocked the nation, Pinewood Elementary buzzed with the energy of a new school year. Colorful bulletin boards lined freshly painted hallways, and the sound of children's laughter echoed through classrooms where once there had been whispered fears and averted gazes. Rebecca Callahan adjusted the Welcome Students sign above her classroom door, pausing to straighten a photograph on the wall beside it. 9 children stood before the state capitol, their faces bright with the kind of smile that reaches the eyes. The photo had been taken 3 months ago, when the Pinewood 9 had been invited to witness the signing of Alawan's Law, legislation requiring independent oversight of child welfare cases and enhanced background checks for guardians. The trial had ended with justice delivered. James Parker and his accomplices sentenced to substantial prison terms. The investigation had expanded, uncovering a network of child exploitation spanning 3 counties, all using powerful connections to silence accusations. "Ms. Callahan," a voice from the doorway pulled Rebecca from her thoughts. Principal Rodriguez, formerly Nurse Ramirez, now the new principal after Morgan's resignation, stood there smiling. "Our special visitor has arrived." Rebecca's heart quickened as she hurried to the main entrance where Detective Rivera, recently promoted to head a new Crimes Against Children unit, waited beside a slender girl with auburn hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. "Elowen," Rebecca breathed, opening her arms as the child rushed forward for a hug. Now 8 years old, Elowen Parker, who had chosen to keep her last name as a badge of survival, had blossomed under the care of her adoptive mother, a retired social worker who specialized in trauma recovery. "I got your invitation," Elowen said, pulling back to look up at her former teacher. "Mom said I could miss 1 day of 2nd grade to visit." "I'm so glad," Rebecca replied, taking in the healthy glow of Elowen's cheeks, the confident set of her shoulders. The classroom fell silent as Rebecca entered with Elowen and Detective Rivera. 20 first graders sat in a circle, wide-eyed with anticipation. Rebecca had prepared them carefully for this visit, explaining in age-appropriate terms about bravery and speaking up when something feels wrong. "Class, this is my friend Elowen and Detective Rivera," Rebecca introduced. "Remember how we talked about safety and trusted adults? They're here to share something important with you." Elowen stepped forward, remarkably poised for her age. "Hi," she began. "Last year I was in a bad place where I wasn't allowed to take baths by myself. I had to stay dirty to be safe, because bath time was when bad things happened." She paused, looking around at the attentive faces. Ms. Callahan noticed something was wrong because she really looked at me, not just with her eyes, but with her heart. A child raised his hand. "Were you scared?" Elowen nodded. "Very scared. But Miss Callahan taught me that some secrets are too heavy to keep by yourself." She gestured to Rivera. "And Detective Rivera showed me that police officers really do help kids, even when other grown-ups don't listen." After answering questions and sharing the child-friendly picture book they had created about safety, Rebecca watched Elowen interact with her students. The girl moved among them with ease, sitting cross-legged on the carpet, leaning comfortably against a chair, simple actions that once would have been unthinkable for her. As the visit concluded, Elowen lingered while Rivera stepped outside to take a call. She approached Rebecca's desk, running her fingers along the polished wood surface. "I have something for you," she said quietly, pulling a folded paper from her pocket. Rebecca carefully unfolded it to find a drawing. A bathtub filled with bubbles, a smiling child playing with rubber ducks, surrounded by loving adults. In careful handwriting across the top, "Bath time is safe now." Tears pricked Rebecca's eyes as she embraced Elowen once more. "Are you happy in your new home?" she whispered. Elowen nodded against her shoulder. "Mom got me rubber ducks and special bubble bath, and she always knocks first." She pulled back, her expression suddenly serious beyond her years. "The other kids they found, are they okay too?" "Yes," Rebecca assured her. "They're all in safe homes now. Some even write to me sometimes." Rivera returned, smiling at the scene before him. "Ready to go, Elowen? Your mom's waiting." As they walked toward the exit, Rebecca noticed Elowen deliberately stopped by the bathroom, looking inside with calm curiosity instead of fear. At the door, the girl turned back. "Ms. Callahan, remember how I used to say I was scared of water?" Rebecca nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "I'm not anymore," Elowen said simply. "Now I even take swimming lessons." Her smile, free and unguarded, was like sunlight breaking through clouds. That's what being safe feels like. After they departed, Rebecca returned to her classroom where her students had resumed their morning activities. She watched them laughing, learning, moving freely without fear, and thought about the invisible scars that some children carried, and how a moment of attention, a willingness to see what others overlooked, could change the course of a life. On her desk, Elowen's drawing caught the morning light. Rebecca pinned it to her bulletin board where she would see it every day, a reminder that in a world where darkness sometimes flourished in plain sight, the simple act of truly seeing a child could illuminate the path to healing. In Pinewood, a community still recovering from the shock of discovering monsters in their midst, seeds of change were taking root. And somewhere across state lines, in a classroom much like Rebecca's, Elowen Parker sat comfortably at her desk. No longer afraid, no longer silent, a child reclaiming the childhood that had nearly been stolen from her.